Hey everybody, it's Ken. So I get a lot of questions around expenses for rental properties. And as you guys know, these can be all over the map depending on where you live. And you can have different amounts in different areas. For example, we have properties in Texas that have very high insurance rates as compared to Arizona. So those are, and same thing can be with property taxes or maintenance and all that stuff. So I'm going to cover those with you now on really some of the things that you should be considering as you're buying rental property. So we'll go back to the very basics here. And I think one of the things that you need to consider are, is you need to take a look at, some of the very basics here. So obviously every property has income. So whether it's a commercial building or a self-storage or just an individual rental, hopefully that's rent, but it could be other things. It could be pet rent. It could be, you're charging extra for storage on the property or a carport or whatever it might be. So, there's your income bucket. And one of the things that we get a question on is vacancy. So the way vacancy works is it's a super scary issue if you're a landlord, but it can be mitigated. And if you have the right tenant in there, then what's going to happen is that tenant gives you proper notice. It gives you time to be able to re-rent it and advertise it and show it and all those kinds of things. And so when we're looking at an area for vacancy, the biggest consideration for us is who wants to live there in the area, not necessarily in your place. And so we're always looking at that. So right now we're looking at a property in Flagstaff, Arizona. And Flagstaff, Arizona, while it's growing, it doesn't have a lot of industry. It doesn't have a lot of job growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It has a big student population. And so one of the things that we're considering is, do we want a property that's full of students, or do we want a property that's full of, professionals that are, working in the community? I have no problem with either ones. I actually have both, but there are very, very different scenarios around the expenses with those two properties. And so as you start to look at vacancy in Flagstaff, for example, or in Detroit, or in Houston, or wherever it might be, it's going to be wildly different in each market, and it's going to be wildly different in each submarket, and it's going to be wildly different based on where the property is located. So generally, my experience has been in an economy that's growing and has a lot of job growth and a lot of population growth, and is in a great school district, your vacancies are generally going to be a little bit lower, and there's going to be a lot more people looking. And that's actually what you want as you're trying to consider, and hopefully you've done that in your acquisition or when you've acquired your property, you've actually thought that through. Because what happens a lot of times is people go out to the edge of town and they try to buy something, a lot less, but there's nobody who wants to live out there. And so you're going to have obviously a higher vacancy than something that maybe is in town. However, you might pay more for that. So it's a fine balance in between. So the second thing, and what we're going to really focus on now, are expenses. And this is the question we get a lot, is what are the expenses for a rental property that we should be considering? And of course, after that is net operating income. And this, folks, is what the banks loan on. So the banks look at net operating income here because they want to know, what's this number? Okay, so that's why expenses are important. That's why income is important. So when you walk into a bank, they're looking at the net operating income because guess what? You might have great credit, but they want to know how much debt can they put on this thing? How much debt can this property support? And it's based entirely off of this. And then, of course, after that is what we're all trying to do, is try to generate cash flow. So let's focus on expenses real quick for all of you guys so that you can kind of get an idea of this here, as you can see, can really, really dig into this net operating income. So you need to consider everything, especially if you're raising money from other people. You want to make sure that you have all this stuff figured out well before you buy it. So let's talk a little bit about the operating expenses. And so what I did for you guys is I'm going to walk through each one. But if you look at our typical financial statement or on any property, we're going to have basically these categories, in some cases even more. So this might not be completely thorough, but it's pretty good, and I'm going to walk through each one. So depending on the size of your property, you may or may not have payroll. If you obviously have one unit, you will not. But as you start to scale up, you might, especially if you start to manage a bunch of properties and now you need help on them, you might have payroll issues. So generally, this category is for people that live on site. You know, we have on-site maintenance people, we have on-site leasing, we have on-site management, etc. So this is a category that takes away from the income that I was talking about earlier. So you want to make sure that payroll is in this category. It definitely takes away on the income. So the tenant is actually paying for the payroll. Okay. The next one is the admin and HOA costs. So we get a lot of questions around HOA. And so we own a property inside of a master plan HOA, and we have to pay quarterly dues into this HOA. But there are things that we get in that HOA. So we get a community rec center. They actually have 2 golf courses. You know, they have all these cool things inside of the HOA, and every single property inside of there pays into this HOA, which then runs this common area. And so this here is something to really consider as you're buying condos. So I get a lot of questions around this. And so I always ask people, you know, does the property have an HOA? So if you're buying a condo, for example, like I know in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is where I live, you can pay $1,000 a month for HOA, or you can pay $150 a month. Big difference. Now, very different properties, but the point is you need to know everything that's inside of this admin category, including HOA fees, because HOAs can go up or down based on the size and how well they're run. And so generally, when I try to buy properties, I really dig into this HOA. So if you're buying into a community that's, let's say, 20, 30, 40 years old, and it needs paint and it needs roofs and the parking lots aren't so good, you might be thinking that you're getting a great deal on that condo, and you may as well be getting a great deal on the condo. But at some point, there's going to be what's called a special assessment, which means they got to paint the entire property. They got to put a new roof on. They got to put in a new parking lot. Those are all things that are going to hit you right here. Now, they're probably going to hit you on the capital expense side. In the HOA, they call it a replacement reserve. But these are things that you, being inside of the HOA, will have to pay. And it's called a special assessment. But generally, the other piece of the HOA are normal operating expenses. So if your condominium is located inside of an HOA, and you've got exterior lighting, let's say on carports, for example, or maybe it's an interior and it's air conditioning. You know, those are all common area expenses that everyone uses. It's a community clubhouse. Certainly the parking lot. Maybe you've got some gates. Whatever it might be, those are all HOA costs. The exterior landscaping to make the place nice. Things that you do not have to pay that somebody else does. That's in a homeowners association. So those are things that you really have to consider and really have to dig into. And I always suggest that you get the financials from the HOA, and you can really take a look at how much money they have in their reserves and how much your HOA fees are. Because I will tell you, most people that are living in an HOA will never vote for an increase. And so what happens sometimes is the HOA fees stay low, and the maintenance on the property doesn't get done because there's no money, because the homeowners don't want to increase their HOAs as inflation goes up and things cost more. And so there's this constant battle between, you know, HOA fees and maintenance. And so it's a very, very important piece that you guys need to take care of. Maintenance is another item. So this is outside of the HOA. This is on the inside. If there is no HOA, it's on the outside and the inside. So maintenance things can be a number of issues, as you guys know. It could be, a carpet. It could be an appliance. It could be, light switches. It can be doorknobs. It can be garage door openers. It can be whatever it is. These things come up. In my rentals, we've had, over the years, I've had water softener issues. I've had water heater issues. I've had HVAC, or heating and ventilation, air conditioning issues. We've had, a number of things, stucco repairs, we've had exterior paint, we've had windows leak, we've had all these things. That's all in this maintenance category. And so whatever you're buying, depending on the condition of it, can really, really drag down in this issue, and you're going to have an expense issue around maintenance. So if the property is 40, 50, 60 years old, like I have a place in Idaho that was built in the early 2000s, and there's always things, or I'm sorry, in the early 1900s. It's over a 100-year-old property, and there's always things on the maintenance side that are always happening. Okay, it's going to be a lot different on something that's brand new, where everything's kind of under warranty and it's newer and it's done. So the maintenance cost can dramatically go up or down on the condition it is when you buy it, and what it costs just to maintain it. The next thing is your marketing. And if you have something small like a 1-bedroom condo or a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, you just have one single family unit, these marketing costs can be very, very low, because everything's kind of on the internet now. But this could be as simple as even a Craigslist ad or something on one of the on one of the internet companies that let you house some rentals and things like that. So that can be small or it can be large, depending on how big your property is. If you have a 50, 60, 70, 100 unit property, we have marketing all the time. We're not putting marketing up and then taking it down. It's always there, because we're always looking for people, because we always know that people are going to be needing a place, and we're either full or we're not full. And so there's a bunch of ways to handle marketing, and there's a bunch of costs, and there's a bunch of things that you can do to get caught up in marketing on the expense side. So be very, very, very careful. I can tell you there's a lot of really, really easy, simple ways to market your property and not pay a lot of money. And so just be cognizant of that. The next one is property management, and this has to do with whether you have the time or somebody else has the time, and you're going to have some kind of reoccurring revenue or reoccurring expense for property management. And so on a single family, it could be $100 a month. On a big property like ours, it might be $5,000 or $6,000 a month, depending on the complexity of the time. And so it's just an expense that you need to consider. And if you have the time to do it, I always recommend that you manage your first couple rentals if you have the time, because it does take time. You're gonna constantly be sucked into tenant calls or maintenance issues or carpet cleaning or turnover or renting or whatever it might be, albeit short term sometimes. And sometimes that happens when there's a vacancy and there's this frantic activity to try to get it full. So this is a real thing. This property management fees, in my opinion, are worth it if you don't have the time. If you live out of state, you want to find a good property manager so that you don't have to fly somewhere, get a hotel, get a car, go over there, figure it all out, meet with your local contractors who you don't even know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the next one is property tax. And this is something that can vary greatly. So, property taxes, for example, in Texas or Oklahoma or Arizona or Nevada or Oregon or Washington or California are wildly different. And so this is a big one. And so you really need to know what your property taxes are on that particular property, because it's definitely an expense. It's definitely something that you have to pay. Sometimes it's paid via your mortgage payment, and they're collecting it through your mortgage, and then the lender's paying it. Sometimes it's not. But the property taxes, I was just skiing in Park City with my friend from Seattle, which is Seattle's considering rent control right now. So they're, on one hand, they're saying, hey, your rents can only go up so much. But he told me property taxes have doubled in 5 years on his properties. And so his property taxes have gone up by 100%, and they're capping his income. And so he's getting kind of squeezed right now on his cash flow. So property taxes are a big thing, guys, because as you guys know, as you dig into property taxes, you're going to see that this funds your local maintenance, it funds your fire department, it funds your local schools, your police department, all that stuff. That's what property taxes are. So it's just important that you understand them and that you also kind of see the trends. It's very hard to project whether they're going to increase over a period of time. A lot of times it has to do with whoever that assessor is. Sometimes they get reelected and then you start to see property tax increases. Sometimes not. Depends on the budget of the city or the state, etc. So just be very, very clear on that. Insurance is another one. Obviously, every property has to be insured. But think of this like your car. So if, God forbid, you're ever in an accident, there's different kinds of insurance. So there's insurance that if somebody hits you, you're fully covered. You got a rental car and you've got all this stuff. And there's insurance where you're not. So same thing on the properties where you really want to dig into these insurance policies. If I were you, I would go on the internet, I would look this up, but you're going to want insurance that covers for replacement costs. You're going to want insurance that covers for renters, rent loss. So let's say you have we just had a property in Houston with units. We had 20 units burned, and we had to displace obviously 20 tenants, and so the insurance company is paying for the rent loss on those people, even though we had to displace them because they were already occupied at the time that the fire happened. So God forbid nobody got really seriously hurt. But insurance is a big deal because it mitigates any issues that you might have around flood or fire or wind damage or things like that. We've had tornadoes and we've had hurricanes and we've had hail knock out 40% of windows in our property in Oklahoma. And so insurance is a big deal. And so you really have to make sure that you have the right coverage for when it comes along. And one of the big things that can be determined here is your deductible. And so your deductible can be really, really low or can be really, really high. And that's going to have a big difference on what your premium is going to be or how much you would pay annually. And so I highly recommend that you really sit down and you really educate yourself around this because you really have an idea what insurance is when you have a loss. And sometimes they just check the box, they get insurance, and they don't really look inside of their coverage. It's very, very important that you understand what coverages you have. On the legal side, now this is obviously could be stuff within your own personal LLC. It might be has to do with evictions. It might be with something on an easement. It might be something that happens inside of a slip and fall inside of a unit where maybe the insurance isn't covered. So the legal is something that is real, and oftentimes it sneaks up on you. You get this letter from this attorney, from a tenant's attorney or maybe a vendor's attorney or whatever it might be. It could be from the seller, could be from the land from the person that owns the land next to you. It could be anything. And so the legal is something that's usually low, but in a lot of cases you just need to be prepared for the fact that if you own a piece of property, you potentially have some legal expenses along with that. And the last one, I think this is the one that a lot of people don't really, really dig into very much, and that's the capital expenses. So all this is operational. So these are things that are kind of expected day over day and month over month are the operating expenses. These are normal operating expenses that you expect on any kind of a rental property. These capital expenses are things that are not expected. It's very important. And so there's two categories here. The first category is if you buy a property that's 20 years old and it needs a new roof, it does not fall in this category. It falls in this category. It's a capital expense. That new roof might be $20,000 or $30,000, okay? Very important that you understand that before you buy. Okay, in an HOA, same kind of thing. We kind of talked about that. That might be in the replacement reserve. They might not have enough money reserved for new roofs. Therefore, it's going to be an operational, it's going to be an expense from you that's going to come out of your HOA fee. This could be a water leak. So we've had tons of these where a water main breaks inside of our property underneath the parking lot. And you got to hire somebody to cut out the parking lot, dig down, fix the repairs. It could be electrical. It could be a fire department issue. It could be, something like that. It could be your sprinkler systems. It could be exterior paint. It could be a boiler, that goes bad, and so that supplies hot water to an entire project. You know, there's so many things. So these would be things that you're not considering, or things that are not operationally year over year or month over month expenses. These are things above that. And so this is a real category. And so for us, we just had a, you know, anything that's brand new, of course, our capital expenses are going to be less. You know, an appliance is a capital expense because it's not an operational expense, because that appliance, you might have it for 8 or 10 years. But if you have to buy a new one, it's considered a capital expense. And then again, you'll have it for another 8 or 10 years. Flooring is a capital expense. A hot water heater is a capital expense. A normal operational one would be maybe a repair to a hot water heater, not a new hot water heater. So these capital expenses fall into different categories as we just went over, and they're classified by your tax accountant, and hopefully you have that, because what you can do is you can capitalize expenses, and actually you can reduce your tax as an ownership or as a partnership. But these are real things, guys. You know, for us, we're buying stuff all the time. We're buying pool pumps. We're redoing pool decks. We're buying pool furniture. We're buying fitness equipment. We're buying stuff for the office. We're buying, you know, stuff, new HVAC units that go down. And we're buying hot water heaters. And we're buying appliances. And, you know, all these kinds of things are normal, ongoing things, and they all fall into this category. But they're non-operational expenses, and it's very important that you understand that all of this stuff, guys, takes away from this. And that's the most important piece, is you want to maximize your net operating income so you can get the highest debt you can. So ultimately, you're cash flowing and you're making a return on your individual investment. So thank you for watching.